In the early morning hours of October 29, 2020, in the quiet countryside of Mauriceville, Texas, something didn't add up. A freight train, long, heavy, and loaded with cargo, was rolling down the tracks under the night sky when the ground itself seemed to betray it. At first it was just a jolt. Then a violent upheaval of metal and steel. Dozens of rail cars left the rails, tumbling over and piling into twisted shapes. The sound of grinding steel, broken wood, and exploding cargo echoed across rural East Texas in a moment that would leave a community shaken. This was no ordinary derailment, it was a collision between force and fate.
The train involved was a heavily laden freight consist, hauling a mix of loaded and empty cars, including several tank cars carrying hazardous materials. As it traveled through the area, something went horribly wrong. Dozens of cars, reports say around 25 cars, derailed, leaving some breached and leaking, and others overturned in a chaotic scene of mangled wheels and broken track. Emergency crews rushed in. Thick smoke rose where fires had started from ruptured car contents. Firefighters moved quickly to contain risks, knowing that dangerous substances could turn a rescue into a catastrophe at any moment. Though this was a freight derailment, not a passenger train, the presence of hazardous materials transformed it into a major emergency, one with the potential to threaten lives and livelihoods.
As responders assessed the scene, one truth became clear: this was not just a wreck, it was a hazardous material situation. Tank cars had been breached. 4 of them were leaking chemicals that demanded immediate caution. Firefighters and hazmat teams established a wide perimeter. Nearby homes and businesses were evacuated, not out of alarm, but out of respect for uncertainty. No one knew how the chemicals might react with heat or water, or how far dangerous fumes could travel. Residents gathered on roadsides, watching smoke rise into the air, their faces etched with shock, concern, and disbelief. The evacuation zones expanded. Schools, shops, and homes were emptied as families waited for word on safety, rescue, and resolution.
First responders did not wait. Fire crews, law enforcement, and hazmat specialists converged on the scene. They wore protective gear, worked in teams, and moved with urgency. Each moment was tense, each decision heavy with responsibility. Boil water advisories were considered. Air quality tests began. Residents were urged to stay alert, stay informed, and stay safe. The derailment wasn't just a mechanical failure, it was a community crisis.
Investigators would later comb through evidence. Track conditions, car weights, brake responses, and signal data were all analyzed. In many derailment scenarios like this one, factors such as track defects, material stress, or environmental conditions can combine to produce disaster. But here, the exact cause would be determined only after extensive review by rail safety authorities, the same groups that study how trains behave, how cargo shifts, and how infrastructure holds up under stress. In the meantime, locals were left to grapple with the immediate aftermath.
Several cars were confirmed to have leaked hazardous materials, a reality that made this derailment more than a cleanup job. It was a danger management scenario that demanded coordination between multiple agencies, from firefighters to environmental experts. Nearby residents waited on edge, unsure when they would return home. Workers in nearby fields kept their distance, watching the plume of smoke rise against the Texas sky. Vehicles were rerouted. Roads were closed. Cleanup crews worked night and day. Every hour brought fresh updates, some relieving, some cautionary. This wasn't a simple accident. It was a moment of disruption felt across the county.
In the days that followed, the cleanup continued. Specialized crews removed twisted rail cars and repaired damaged tracks. Environmental teams monitored soil and water for contamination. Residents were slowly allowed to return. No fatalities were reported, a relief, given the hazardous cargo involved, but the derailment left emotional scars, shaken confidence, and a renewed focus on rail safety. Questions about infrastructure maintenance, track conditions, and the risks of transporting dangerous materials by rail began conversations in town halls and living rooms alike.
The Mauriceville derailment of 2020 reminds us that railroads, vital arteries of commerce, network through towns, fields, and communities alike. But when something goes wrong, the consequences are immediate and very real. Trains don't just move goods, they intersect with human lives. A derailment is not just steel on gravel. It is families displaced, roads closed, emergency crews deployed, and a community on alert. Mauriceville's night of fire, smoke, and disruption was a vivid reminder that safety on the rails matters, not just for commerce, but for every life that lives within trains' reach.
The wreckage was cleared. The rails were rebuilt. Freight began to roll again through East Texas. But for the people who watched smoke rise against the dawn, who huddled in evacuation zones and waited for reassurance, the memory remains. It's a reminder that technology and nature are powerful, but communities are resilient. And that when steel meets failure, it's not just the tracks that suffer, it's the people who live beside them.